Please stop. Don't do this.
The plea was fragile, almost lost to the roar of the storm, but it clung to the night air like shattered glass. Caleb Hart had just stepped out of the black sedan, suitcase in hand, rain dripping from his hair and soaking through his collar. He wasn't supposed to be home tonight. His trip to Chicago had been extended. At least that's what Vanessa, his new wife, believed. But an unexpected early flight, a silent ride from the airport, and a quiet longing to surprise his mother had brought him to this moment, and to this nightmare. The porch light burned dim against the curtain of rain, illuminating a scene that twisted his stomach. There, on the wet concrete, his mother, Miriam Hart, knelt helplessly, her thin housecoat clinging to her frail frame, her silver hair plastered to her face. Her trembling hands swept the ground in frantic arcs, searching for the cane she could no longer find. And standing above her, shielded by a wide black umbrella like some queen in exile, was Vanessa. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect smile for the audience she thought was watching. "Get up," she said coolly, the sharp click of her heels audible even through the storm. "You're not staying here like this. Not tonight. You've done enough." The rain ran in sheets down the steps, washing over Miriam's bare feet, pooling around her knees. Her lips quivered with the cold, her eyes, those unseeing, cloudy eyes, blinking rapidly as if they could will away the darkness that had claimed them years ago. Caleb froze, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. For a moment, disbelief kept him rooted in place. He thought maybe, he was misunderstanding what he was seeing. But then Miriam spoke again, voice shaking. "Please, Vanessa, don't do this. I'm sorry if I upset you. I didn't mean to." Something inside Caleb snapped. The suitcase thudded onto the driveway, forgotten. He sprinted forward, splashing through the puddles, his breath sharp and ragged in the cold air. "Mama," he gasped as he reached her, dropping to his knees. "It's me. It's Caleb. I'm here." Her hands, cold and trembling, found his face by memory, the way only a mother could. Relief poured through her touch as she whispered, "Caleb, you came home." Behind him, Vanessa's voice cut through the night like the edge of a blade. "Caleb, what are you doing here? You weren't supposed to. What is going on here?" His voice, low and steady, held a dangerous calm that silenced even the rain for a moment. Neighbors' curtains shifted. Shadows moved in their windows. The porch camera blinked steadily, its tiny blue light capturing every second. The sound of the storm swelled, but nothing drowned out the quiet horror twisting in Caleb's chest. Vanessa tilted her head, her tone casual, almost mocking. Your mother, she caused a scene during dinner prep. I had guests coming. Enough," Caleb said sharply, cutting her off. He shrugged out of his drenched jacket and wrapped it around Miriam's shivering shoulders, pulling her into his arms. The weight of her, too light, too fragile, drove the truth into him like lightning. He looked up at Vanessa, eyes dark and unflinching. "This ends now," he said. The only reply was the hollow beat of rain on the driveway and the sharp, trembling inhale of a woman who had just realized the storm wasn't only outside anymore. Before the thunder cracked and the porch light burned like a warning flare, there was a gentler story, one stitched together by quiet mornings, coffee on the porch, and the steady hum of a house that had been home for over 40 years. Miriam Hart had lived there her entire adult life, long before her sight began to fade, long before the voices around her shifted from familiar warmth to cold calculation. She had been a third-grade teacher for 36 years, known in town for the way she remembered every child's name even decades later. Parents still spoke about the little things, the way she hummed old hymns during spelling tests, the birthday card she handwrote in perfect cursive, the soft but certain voice that told every child, "You matter here." Blindness came slowly to Miriam. First, the blur in her peripheral vision. Then the shadows that clung to familiar objects, until even the faces she loved became outlines in a fog she could never clear. But Miriam was resilient. She learned every inch of her house by memory, fingertips tracing edges until each corner became a landmark, every rug a compass point. And then there was Caleb, her boy, her anchor. After his father passed, he became the quiet hero of her world. He was the one who replaced the porch boards when they creaked, who drove her to church every Sunday, who checked the locks before bed even when she told him she'd managed just fine. When he landed his job in finance and started traveling for work, he called her every evening no matter the time zone. "How's my favorite girl?" he'd say, and she'd smile, holding the phone close, never telling him how much she counted the hours until the next call. Then came Vanessa. She was younger than Caleb, with a laugh that turned heads and a confidence that filled every room she entered. They met at a charity gala in the city, and within weeks, the whirlwind had carried them from first dates to a courthouse wedding. Caleb glowed in those early days, his voice bright whenever he spoke about her. "She's smart, Mama," he said, "and kind. You'll love her." Miriam wanted to believe him, and at first, she tried. She baked bread the way Caleb loved and greeted Vanessa with soft smiles and warm hands. But little things shifted almost immediately. The framed photographs that once lined the hallway disappeared into storage boxes. The piano Caleb learned to play on vanished one weekend. Donated, Vanessa explained breezily, because it took up too much space. The rugs Miriam used to navigate the rooms were rolled away, replaced with smooth hardwood that made every step a careful, trembling guess. To the neighbors, Vanessa was charming. She waved at Mrs. Whitaker across the street, hosted weekend brunches, and posted smiling photos of herself and Caleb with captions about love and partnership. But inside the house, the air grew colder. Miriam started counting her steps more carefully. She whispered apologies for touching things that had been moved, for taking too long to find the sugar bowl, for existing in a space that no longer felt like her own. Caleb didn't see the sharp edges of this new life. He was away more often, chasing deadlines and trying to build the life he thought they all wanted. Vanessa made sure of that. "Don't worry about us," she'd say sweetly when he checked in from another hotel room. "Your mother and I are fine. She just needs to adjust." By the time summer rolled into fall, Miriam had learned to make herself small. She kept to her room when Vanessa hosted her friends. She ate meals alone more often, telling herself it was easier this way. But even then, there were moments she couldn't ignore. The way her cane would vanish from its usual place by the door, the subtle trip hazards that appeared out of nowhere, the constant reminders that she was a guest in her own home. She told herself she could endure it for Caleb's sake. She told herself it wasn't cruelty, just misunderstanding. But deep down, a quiet ache warned her. Storms don't announce themselves until the first crack of thunder. Started subtly, the kind of cruelty you could almost excuse if you were determined to believe the best in people. "You missed a spot," Vanessa said one morning, her voice sharp but sugar-coated as Miriam carefully wiped the counter after breakfast. Miriam froze mid-motion, cloth in hand, unsure where the missed spot could be. She could feel the counters were clean, her fingers didn't lie, but she smiled faintly and murmured, "I'll do it again, dear," because that was what peace required. Then came the sighs. The deep theatrical sighs when Miriam asked for help finding her misplaced cane. The clipped tone when she tried to join conversations at the dinner table. Little by little, Vanessa shifted the dynamic from polite to hostile, though always in ways that were invisible when Caleb was home. When guests visited, the humiliation grew bolder. Vanessa introduced Miriam as though she were a project, not a person. "This is Miriam," she'd announce with a smile. "Caleb's mother. She's adjusting. We're working on independence." The laughter that followed, polite, shallow, and cruel, burned Miriam, though she never let it show. She would simply nod, hands folded in her lap, as though apologizing for the space she occupied. Soon the trick started. One evening, as Miriam brewed tea, Vanessa swapped the sugar bowl with a salt dish. Miriam, trusting her muscle memory, stirred 2 spoonfuls into her cup, then sipped. The cough that followed drew sharp laughter from the other side of the kitchen island. "Oh, Miriam," Vanessa said lightly, "you've got to pay more attention." The guests laughed too, thinking it harmless. Only Mrs. Whitaker, across the street, peeking through her kitchen window later that night, saw Miriam rinsing the cup in silence, her shoulders trembling. Mrs. Duffy, the caregiver who had been coming on Wednesdays for years, quietly stopped showing up. When Miriam asked about her, Vanessa replied with a dismissive shrug. "She wasn't a good fit anymore. We'll find someone better." But no one ever came. And when Miriam mentioned it to Caleb during his rushed phone calls, he only heard the reassurance in Vanessa's voice. "It's under control, honey. Don't worry." The house itself became a maze of quiet danger. Rugs were shifted out of alignment, just enough to catch a cautious foot. The railing at the back steps, her lifeline, was removed one afternoon. Modernizing, Vanessa explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Miriam tripped more often after that, bruises hidden under her sleeves like secrets she didn't dare share. By winter, the tension had calcified. Miriam learned to measure her words, to move only when necessary, to sit quietly in the living room, and pretend she didn't hear the laughter from Vanessa's friends drifting through the house. She told herself that silence was safety, that if she stayed small enough, she might disappear from the sharp edges of Vanessa's gaze. The night of the storm, things spiraled. Vanessa had spent days preparing for the dinner party. A curated guest list of people she wanted to impress, menus printed on ivory cardstock, candles staged just so. Miriam, eager to be useful, listened to the hum of the kitchen and tried to help. She traced her way to the counter, feeling for the tray of herbs she'd heard mentioned. "Let me help with the—" She began softly, fingers brushing the edge of a plate. The crash that followed was deafening. The tray tipped, rosemary and thyme scattering like fallen leaves across the tile. Conversations froze. Guests exchanged awkward glances. Vanessa's smile didn't falter as she stepped forward, but her voice sharpened like broken glass. "I told you to stay out of the kitchen, Miriam." "I'm sorry," Miriam whispered, backing toward the doorway. Her cane was nowhere to be found. Her hands trembled as they searched for the familiar hook by the door. Vanessa followed, her heels clicking against the tile like a metronome of contempt. "You've embarrassed me enough for one night," she hissed, low enough that only Miriam could hear. Outside, thunder cracked, rattling the window panes. Inside, a storm of another kind gathered, unnoticed by everyone but Miriam. The storm outside roared like it had swallowed the quiet of the neighborhood whole. Wind whipped through the trees, sending branches rattling against windows as the rain poured in heavy, unrelenting sheets. Inside the house, the laughter of Vanessa's dinner guests filled the rooms, soft jazz playing from the speakers as if nothing outside existed. But on the porch, Miriam sat curled against the wooden column, rain streaming down her face, soaking through her thin housecoat. She hugged herself for warmth, her bare feet trembling against the slick concrete. She couldn't see, but she could hear. The muffled hum of voices, the clinking of wine glasses, the cheerful music that made it painfully clear. Life went on without her inside. And then headlights swept across the driveway. A car door slammed. Fast footsteps splashed through puddles. Caleb. He hadn't planned to come home. His last-minute flight had landed hours early, and the taxi ride from the airport had been quiet. The kind of quiet that builds when you imagine surprising someone you love. He had thought of the look on his mother's face when she heard his voice. How she'd light up with that soft smile that always said home. But when his eyes found her, his world stopped. "Mama." His voice cracked, sharp and hoarse against the roar of the rain. Her head turned toward the sound of his voice, her cloudy eyes wide and disoriented. "Caleb? Caleb, is that you?" "It's me," he said, his chest tight as he crossed the driveway in a sprint. The suitcase dropped with a dull thud into a puddle, forgotten. He reached her in 3 strides, kneeling in the cold water as his arms wrapped around her trembling shoulders. "I'm here, Mama. I'm here." her hands icy and shaking, found his face by instinct, the way only a mother could. "You came home," she whispered, her voice breaking. Inside the house, the laughter dimmed as the front door opened. Warm light spilled onto the porch, cutting through the rain. And there stood Vanessa, umbrella still in her hand, her eyes wide in stunned disbelief. She hadn't expected him. Not tonight. Not now. "Caleb," she said, her voice laced with false surprise. You weren't supposed to be home until—" He cut her off, his voice sharp, steady, and cold. "What is this, Vanessa?" She blinked, scrambling for words, her polished facade cracking like porcelain under pressure. She got upset. She was disrupting the dinner. I just told her to— To what?" Caleb's voice rose, a controlled fury simmering just beneath the surface. He lifted his mother easily, his jacket shielding her frail body from the storm as he stepped past Vanessa, his soaked shoes leaving a trail of water on the polished hardwood. To sit outside, in the rain? The guests fell silent, their chatter dying as they realized what was happening. Mrs. Whitaker, the neighbor, who had been invited out of courtesy, clutched her phone. She had been watching from her window when Caleb's taxi pulled in and had silently slipped a backup battery into the porch camera hub earlier, ensuring it captured everything. Now, the little blue light on the console blinked steadily, recording every breath, every word. Caleb set Miriam gently on the couch, kneeling beside her, brushing damp strands of silver hair from her forehead. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice soft again, reserved only for her. "You're safe now." Miriam clutched his sleeve, her voice trembling. "Caleb, I tried to stay out of the way." He looked up at Vanessa then, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, sharp and unflinching, spoke for him. "This ends tonight," he said, his tone quiet but final. The room held its breath. The storm raged on outside, but inside the balance of power had shifted. Justice didn't explode like thunder. It moved in quietly, steady and undeniable, the kind of justice that doesn't ask permission to be heard. Caleb sat his mother gently on the couch, tucking a blanket around her trembling frame. Her wet housecoat clung to her skin and her damp hair stuck to her cheeks, but she tried to smile for him. A trembling, fragile smile that broke something in his chest. "You're safe, Mama," he whispered, his voice low, even as anger pulsed beneath it like a drumbeat. "I've got you now." Then he turned. The room, moments ago alive with polite conversation and the clinking of wine glasses, had gone utterly still. Vanessa stood frozen by the door, her umbrella still in hand, her perfect smile flickering like a light losing power. The guests, neighbors, acquaintances, people who had been drawn to her charisma, shifted uneasily in their seats, unsure where to look, their champagne glasses trembling in their hands. Caleb's voice, when it came, was quiet but sharp. "Every one of you saw her out there." No one spoke. "You watched," he continued, stepping closer to the center of the room, "while my blind mother sat in the rain, and not one of you thought to open the door." Vanessa found her voice then, brittle and defensive. She embarrassed me, Caleb. She came into the kitchen when I asked her not to. Stop." The single word, firm and heavy, cut through her excuses. From the corner of the room, Mrs. Whitaker, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, stepped forward. "Caleb," she said softly but clearly, "it's all on the camera. Every second. The moment you left, she moved the cane. The moment it started raining. The moment she pushed Miriam out and locked the door." The weight of her words settled over the room like a verdict. All eyes turned to the little blue light on the console table, blinking steadily. Vanessa's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Caleb took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Pack your things," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "You're leaving. Tonight." The guests, stunned into silence, began to stand. One by one, they gathered their coats, avoiding Vanessa's gaze, and filed out quietly into the storm. By the time the last door closed, only the three of them remained: Caleb, his mother, and the woman who had just lost every ounce of control. By morning, the house felt different. The police came at dawn, their presence calm but deliberate. Vanessa, still clinging to the frayed threads of her arrogance, tried to argue, but the officers were unmoved. The emergency protective order was clear. She was to leave, and not return. Her protest faded into the rain as they walked her down the porch steps, suitcase in hand, heels clicking hollowly against the wet wood. Caleb stood at the doorway, his arms steady around his mother's shoulders. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything words could offer. The consequences unfolded swiftly after that. Caleb's longtime attorney wasted no time activating the prenuptial agreement, the one Vanessa had skimmed but never truly read. Buried in the fine print, written at his father's insistence years before, was a single clause. Any act of abuse, neglect, or harm toward a dependent relative voids all marital claims. With that, her access to the joint accounts was severed. The credit cards were frozen before noon. The neighborhood that had once admired Vanessa's sharp smile and confident stride turned cold. The charity board she chaired voted her out unanimously. The women who had once lingered in her orbit quietly deleted her number. And Troy, her cousin, who had laughed at Miriam's expense and sold the family piano for a quick profit, watched as officers retrieved the instrument and returned it to the living room, where Miriam's fingers would find their way back to its familiar keys. The court required Vanessa to complete a program on disability awareness and elder care, a stipulation of her probation. Each week, she sat in a circle of strangers, forced to confront every cruel decision in the sterile language of case studies and reflections. The mask she once wore so easily no longer fit. Caleb, meanwhile, stayed steady. He didn't gloat. He didn't seek revenge in the loud ways. His justice was quiet but precise, the kind that built a foundation his mother could trust again. The storm eventually passed, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred. The house, once heavy with tension, now breathed again, slowly, carefully, like someone learning how to trust. The very next morning, Caleb rose before the sun. He brewed coffee the way his mother loved it, not too strong, just the right amount of sugar, and set the cup gently on the kitchen table. Miriam sat nearby, her silver hair still damp at the ends, her hands wrapped around the warmth of the cup. She didn't speak at first. Neither did he. But the quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. Later that day, Caleb got to work. The back steps, stripped of their railing months ago, had a new one installed by noon, bolted tightly into place. By evening, rugs were returned to their original spots, smoothed and secured so Miriam could once again walk her house without fear. In the kitchen, every drawer and cupboard was relabeled in Braille, carefully done by Caleb himself. His large hands struggled at first with the adhesive dots, but he persisted until every label was perfectly placed. When Mrs. Duffy returned that Wednesday, her familiar laughter carried through the house. She brought homemade bread, humming a tune from years ago, as if time had rewound to when kindness filled every corner of their home. Miriam smiled more that week than she had in months. Music returned too. One quiet evening, Miriam sat at the piano again, her fingers trembling slightly as they found the keys. The first notes were hesitant, then stronger, blooming into the melody she'd played for decades, the same hymn she had taught her students long ago. Caleb leaned against the doorway, listening, his eyes wet but steady. It wasn't just music. It was survival. It was home reclaiming itself. The neighborhood rallied in ways Miriam hadn't expected. Mrs. Whitaker organized a quiet watch group, neighbors pairing up to check on elders and those with disabilities. Kindness, she said at the first meeting, isn't passive. It's something we do, together. The initiative grew quickly, a quiet ripple of good that began at the house on the corner where a storm had once raged. As for Vanessa, she faded into the background of their lives. She moved into a small apartment in a nearby town, Her once carefully curated social media accounts now private and silent. She completed her court-ordered classes, week after week, sitting in sterile rooms where her excuses no longer carried weight. Months later, a letter arrived. An apology written in shaky handwriting, full of words about regret and reflection. Miriam read it slowly, her fingers tracing the ink. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box in her room. Forgiveness, she knew, was not about forgetting. It was about choosing peace for herself. Caleb adjusted his life too. He arranged fewer business trips, choosing instead to build routines that kept him close to home. He cooked dinners, sometimes too salty, sometimes undercooked, and they ate together, laughter filling spaces that had been quiet for too long. In the evenings they sat on the porch, the roses blooming again in the yard, mugs of tea warming their hands as they listened to the river in the distance. By spring, the house no longer felt haunted. It felt whole. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the yard in gold, Miriam tilted her face toward the warmth and whispered, "It's peaceful again." Caleb, sitting beside her, smiled softly. "It's home again," he said,